But when I was asked to give a day in the life of a chief sustainability officer, I thought, well, let's pause for a second. What I do, although what I do looks very unique, in truth, my role as a sustainability officer is very similar to any sustainability officer in any other industry. And I think anybody could lead this panel conversation today. So panel conversation between us and the wonderful panel audience. But in truth, I think what I do is facilitate and translate the environmental practices behind any industry sustainability program. The environmental principles are the same. We all know there's finite resources. In each category, energy, water, and waste, there are just facts about the reality of our industry and kind of where the consumption is or where the resources come from and what happens when you're done with them. What's even more exciting is that there's a whole body of best practices out there because corporations have been trying to tackle this for years. So what makes the sustainability officer's role unique is how they take those facts and how they take those best practices and they apply them to the unique challenges of their organization. So I'm going to talk about my organization and my approach as a case study to facilitate the dialogue of how we can all access those best practices and maybe help continue to challenge you to think about your ongoing role in your organization or your life's effort to reduce your environmental impact. So, first let's talk about the fact that I'm actually a sustainability director and not a chief sustainability officer. GreenBiz, which hopefully, how many of you read GreenBiz or get their daily messages? Yeah, a lot of us go to GreenBiz as our source of information. It's a great source. Well, the last 2 years, they've been conducting a study on the salary and the position of sustainability professionals. And how many of you actually filled out this survey? Because I think there's a couple people. Yeah, there's at least 5 of us in the room who are part of the 561 organizations represented by this survey. As you can see, this table reflects the highest ranking person at an organization who has full-time sustainability or environmental responsibility. So 38% are only at a VP level, and 34% are only at a director level. Well, this is actually a celebration because this is an increase. So I am actually our acting chief sustainability officer as the director and the highest ranking full-time sustainability person. And my fellow VP of Environmental Affairs at Xanterra Company is their chief sustainability officer because he is the highest ranking environmental official for the organization. So as you can see, there are some organizations that highest ranking person is manager. And what's shocking is that 14%, several of the over 1 billion grossing companies don't even have one full-time dedicated person. What they've done is integrated sustainability into existing people's roles, which is a debate for another time, but we could talk about that. So there are some other trends here that I thought were interesting in that report. I wanted to give context before jumping into my own case study. Who does the sustainability officer report to? And how does that influence, one, your perception, the world's perception of your brand, or two, how that program actually unfolds at your organization? 27% report to public affairs, so external affairs, communications. 16% report to operations. At my organization, I kind of fit in a mix between the both. My actual role reports into the operations. We actually call it administration because we have lots of different business units and not every aspect of our business has an operation. If you're promoting a live concert, you don't have an operations manager, you have a production manager. So we're in the admin department where we create the tools that support all the different business units. 14% are sales and marketing. So there's a difference between sales and marketing and external affairs, but there's still a communication focus. So it's heavily weighted in communications. And then 14% legal. So that's the environmental health and safety history in that background. Another thing, how important is this to your organization? It's exciting to say that 29% say that it's a part of their core objectives. And I'm really happy to say that at AEG it is. And so when we publicly launched our program in 2010, I've been there since 2007. When we publicly launched our program in 2010, our CEO immediately put it as one of our core objectives and has reinforced that every annual meeting, every all-staff training, as part of one of the top 5 initiatives from our organization globally. 56% say it's on the agenda, but it's not one of the core. And what we're seeing in this 2-year trend is that it's switching over to being a part of the core, and we hope to continue to see that. And then the gender gap. What's fascinating about this, I didn't call this out because we're at the Women in Green Forum. The survey itself put this as one of the top 3 points, which, as we all know, the Women in Green Forum isn't just for women, it's for men and women, because we all have a role to play in elevating women in our society. And I'm very thankful to the Green Biz survey for calling this out. There's a huge gap in the leadership and in the pay. In my role as director, 59% of the other directors were men, and they were earning 17% more than me, according to the general survey. I didn't see the exact numbers. So I thought those were fascinating trends to set the tone for kind of what industry I'm in. But moving over to my case study and a little bit about me. I'm a big believer, and as I said, the core sustainability and environmental principles are out there. They're proven. Then we have how we approach sustainability at our organization. There's best practices out there, but it's how we apply it to our organization. My background, I was a poli-sci major who didn't take one environmental class in college, except for a human rights and indigenous rights class that had an environmental sub-theme. I got into environmentalism in a best practice format through outside of that, getting involved in a sustainability committee, helping achieve LEED certification for a dorm, and ultimately helping my campus adopt a policy of sustainability. It was all outside of academics or study. I was able to seize that passion that I had and that experience and bring it to where I am now. So another key component, I think, for all of us is identifying those opportunities to get involved or creating those opportunities. So I actually created the AEG One Earth program and the environmental program at AEG as I had an opportunity and I seized it. So that's a theme you're going to hear me bring up. And the third thing is engaging stakeholders. So I'm going to keep bringing those themes up here. My areas of responsibility at AEG, strategy development and process review. I'm a systems analyst in a way. I look at where inefficiency is in our company, and I try to drive and develop strategy to reduce that inefficiency. Employee education and leading cross-functional teams. So I engage our stakeholders. I take these core environmental principles, I translate them into something that makes more sense to our staff and what our business is, and then I have to engage them to connect across the different divisions and the different departments, because we all battle silos. We all want to make sure the environment isn't a silo within your organization, but that it's connected across the company. Project management, monitoring, and reporting. So once we develop this great vision and goals, we actually have to execute across some of these projects and then monitor and report it. So I'll get into great detail about that with our program because that's one of our biggest successes. And then external communications, public outreach, and engagement, which is what we're here today. It's very important to tell your story. It's an accountability measure, but it's also hopefully going to inspire people. AEG One Earth, AEG's global environmental program. It's our environmental commitment. It sets environmental policy and goals for the company. There are 4 major components. We measure and report on our footprint through ecometrics, where we collect 30 data points on our environmental program. We educate and communicate, and we have environmental best practices. This format is similar to any other organization. What I've done here is I've framed our environmental program, and I reinforce it to every single staff member. So I put this presentation that I'm about to finish has been something I presented to every single staff member at AEG, either by giving it at all staff meetings or actually creating this PowerPoint with a script that gives to HR managers and other operation managers. So while walking you through my program, I'm also going to tell you how we do it. So this is the way we frame our program. Every single one of our employees can tell you that there are 4 components to AEG One Earth. It has to do with our policy, our goals. We measure our footprint, that we communicate it and we educate fans, and that we have best practices that we're putting in place. And so it's kind of framing up the approach that we take to the environment. Environmental policy. Our policy is dedicated to continual improvement and getting our staff to understand that the environment is not a one-time activity. If you supported the installation of solar panels, that's great, but that's not where your job ends. If you helped with the initiative of rolling out recycling, that's great, but that's also not where your job ends. So getting people to continually think of ways of improving our environmental footprint. We also talk about compliance with environmental regulations. In our industry, there's not that many environmental regulations that relate to us, but we want people to remember that there is some sincerity and there's repercussions of the things we do. So making sure we're aware of our environmental regulations. Setting and achieving environmental objectives. So every core program has to have a goal that combines and moves people forward. So we have 2020 vision goals, but we actually ask each business unit to define their own goals. So it's important, so it has something that drives that local level employee base that gets them tied in. Because we could have a corporate goal that might not have a real touch point to your local staff. And then listening to others, the concerns of employees, guests, and other stakeholders. Our business relies on its community role. We are in your community. In every location where we are, we're either your favorite concert or your favorite venue, or at least we want to be. So getting people to being open and allowing the stakeholders that are our stakeholders influence our program, very important. 2020 vision goals. The only thing that I'd like to point out here is that, and what you heard in the video, is that AEG One Earth is one of the most comprehensive programs for our industry. You're all familiar with Dow, you're all familiar with, I'm going to blank on Walmart. Every other major corporation has defined environmental goals and the key areas of their impact. Our industry, the entertainment industry, had yet to do so and hadn't really acknowledged all areas of their impact. So we were one of the first companies to sit there, assess our footprint, and make a claim to what areas we were going to reduce, which were based on our highest areas of impact. So I actually was at AEG for 2 years prior to releasing this 2020 vision goal statement, collecting the information and assessing where our footprint was and what was most important to our stakeholders. 5 areas of involvement: energy and climate, recycling and waste, water conservation, sustainable purchasing. Something that's unique about AEG to point out, we are not a producer or manufacturer. We do not have a product that we sell an experience. We are a place where you consume products, and we're a place where you waste products, and you consume energy, and you consume water, but we are not a place where you create something together or use lots of materials. So one of our biggest opportunities for influence was in the supply chain. Every organization can apply pressure to their supply chain, but for us, it's one of the only places where we influence materials, and we influence our waste stream. Education. We have a really unique opportunity because we're touching thousands of people on a daily basis. So we understood that, and we made that a part of our core objectives. So we have this objective, 100% environmental education. That's us seizing every opportunity we have to tell our environmental story with the intent of educating and inspiring. So if we have a waterless urinal, you should see a placard above it that tells you why it's a not why, but what the waterless urinal accomplishes in the 40,000 gallons of water it saves. If you're walking by our concession stand and we just replaced our LED lights, we want there to be a placard there telling you about that. Hopefully that'll inspire you to go check out the LED light. It's available at your local department store, and I'd say Home Depot because we have the Home Depot Center, so check them out. Ecometrics, so I mentioned measuring. A little background here on how we got to measuring these footprints. Any organization or any sustainability officer will tell you the most important thing is about metrics. And we're going to have a panel later today that will talk about financial metrics. I mean, we all are looking for these indicators of success. Well, metrics are out there, and the standard for metrics are kind of been established, especially in the facility management world. So if you have facilities under your control, there are standards for what you should be looking at. And one of the biggest things that we do for any policy, I'd say all sustainability officers do, is assess all the best practices out there and then modify the tools for your use. So we looked at the EPA Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and we looked at the other tools that were out there for reporting, and we actually partnered with a sister company that had developed a really good model for collecting metrics. Our initial metric collection was by Excel. So we were sending out an Excel document to each venue that had a footprint and identifying one representative to help document that. We knew we needed to automate that, so we started looking for partners. And a lot of partners stepped forward. This was in 07, 08. A lot of partners stepped forward saying they had the technology, but they actually hadn't modified it for a large-scale portfolio. We were lucky to find a company, Summit Energy, that's recently become Schneider Electric or merged with Schneider Electric, that was able to modify a metric system for us. So now, after 5 years, we have an online portal where our employees go directly in and enter their metrics. So it's been a key, just getting the metrics to a point of authenticity, getting to your staff to feel like when they put the metrics into a system, that the metrics come back out to them in a way that's important. The first 2 years, they were putting it into an Excel spreadsheet and sending it to us. But how were they going to use that Excel spreadsheet to understand what that data meant? We didn't have it automated to do cute reports or anything that they could use for their own management of the venue. So we had accidentally created a one-way street that didn't really engage our staff. So the last few years has been about how do you make it a two-way street. So they're supporting data and providing data, but that data is useful to them. So when you heard earlier about waste, kind of engaging in incentives, sometimes the knowledge of how your effort is helping is all that you need to share to incentivize people. And giving your staff access to that knowledge is really important. I had to face it that way. I fell into that. Education and communication. So as I mentioned, this is a huge focus for AEG because of our role as a live entertainment company. And we were the first in our industry to do a sustainability report to the GRI standard. Many of you might be very familiar with the GRI standard if you're paying attention to larger companies that are using it, but it's unusual for a company in our sector to use a third-party standard for a report. Our industry is used to really flashy brochures and sizzle videos like you've seen. So it was a real sea change to get people comfortable with the transparency of showing our data. And one of the ways that we really had to emphasize was normalizing our data, because our venues are so different, and people are saying, you can't just show my footprint versus a small 2,000-seat club if I'm a 20,000-seat venue. So our sustainability report allows us to show our normalized footprint and really start to have an honest dialogue with our consumer about what our impact is. And not all of it's pretty, but some of it's really cool. So it's created a really great conversation, and we're actually releasing our second one all time later this year in November. I'm sorry I don't have it here, but if you leave your card with me at the front, we'll make sure to send you a copy. And then employee and public outreach. So we are activating green teams across our venues. I should have mentioned that AEG's venues, although I showed you the video, are all over the world. We have 13 venues in Australia. We have several venues in Europe, I think at least 9. And then we have some in China, and we're starting to do work in Brazil around World Cup. So we are dealing with environmental regulations and environmental metrics across very different scales and very different systems. So putting together a tool to connect those employees and have them best practice share through green teams and through our corporate staff has been a real part of our program. The last piece here is using our platform. We do Earth Hour, we do Earth Day, and we activate across a large scale of venues. So at one event, we've had up to 60 venues participate, and that's Earth Hour. So 60 venues going dark with World Wildlife Fund in their local community, sometimes the only venue in their community participating in Earth Hour, hopefully raising that conversation of why are people turning off their lights for an hour? Well, let's talk about our impact on climate change. So another piece is partnerships. You saw us have a quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger in our video, and that was when we were working closely with him as the governor. And we've been looking at and trying to expand our relationships with the EPA. There's a role for partnerships with both government and with nonprofits. The ones I've highlighted here are industry alliances that are trying to shift the entire industry. The Green Sports Alliance, the Green Music Group. Once again, acknowledging that the environmental facts are the same. The best practices are out there. The challenge for everyone is how to take those best practices and make them into tools for their own people, their own team, or who their audience is. So for us, we've been really enjoying the relationship with Green Sports Alliance. We're very active. They have an annual conference we will be attending next week in Seattle. And I'd encourage, if you guys are passionate about sports and sustainability, you should definitely follow them and see the work they're doing. But they've been a great source of translating these tools that have been developed for the building sector to the sports building sector. And they're a part of that dialogue with us. So documenting best practices. I'm saying there's this world of best practices out there. A lot of the other industries document their best practices. We developed an environmental preferable procurement policy that one of the audience members here helped us shape when he was an intern with us, so it's really exciting to come full circle. And the way we did that is scour all the best practices that already existed. Why reinvent the wheel? There were already several environmental preferable procurement policies out there. The EPA has a really great EPP. California State had an EPP. Bank of America had a great paper purchasing policy that they put on their website. So we scoured every single highly regarded environmental preferable procurement policy and then started to look at what pieces of that were relevant for our business. And we pieced it together for our own EPP, complete with tools for asking your vendor to report on the impact of their products and how to give guidance to our purchasers on how to select certain things like carpet, or we actually identified 4 high-impact products: lighting, for us, lighting, HVAC, janitorial products, and paper products. So we were able to take these best practices and then retool it for how our purchasing works at our organization. And it's been incredibly helpful. Can always use improvement because we're continually improvement, but it's great. Our industry doesn't document best practices because our industry is full of venue managers that are experts that are used to dealing with requests from artists at the last minute or putting on large events like the Grammys. The knowledge in our industry are in the heads of these really experienced operations managers. So I come from a world that's all documented. Everything's documented. I have an EPP, it's documented. It's all about, let's look at the policy and the law. Well, how to translate to someone who reads a production note that's 1 page that gives them all the instruction they need to know to manage the venue because they know that venue inside and out, and all they needed was the special 1-sheeter instruction. So what we've been doing is trying to translate that notion of documenting best practice, getting it outside of their heads onto 1 paragraph, 5 bullet points. You'd be surprised the power of documenting 5 bullet points and sharing it across 100 venues. So I'm not saying document best practices in a way that become pillars and pillars of paper, but there are ways of documenting successful actions and spreading them across people and getting your staff comfortable with that documentation. So I mentioned I was going to keep bringing up these 3 things, which is knowing your environmental framework. The best practices are out there. There's suggestions on approach. Green Biz has several how-to tools. We in this room have developed so many of our own. The most important thing is to know your environmental framework and commit to it. At least commit to how you're going to explain it to people. So we've committed to the 4 components of the AAG One Earth program. It's our way of engaging our staff and giving something they can speak to. The other thing, identifying opportunities to participate or create them. Some of you in this room, when we started, we asked how many people have full-time environmental responsibility versus how many people wanted it. And there is an opportunity for you to have more environmental responsibility. I challenge you to think about, if you're not the person in charge of your organization's environmental program, look at the person who is or see where it is. And if it isn't, see if that's something you want to get involved in. But if there is someone already there, look at how your department can fit in, because there is an environmental impact to each role and each staff position and each department. And the EPA was up here talking about earlier, how do you define a green job? Well, at Staples Center and Home Depot Center, we train all of our employees, including the ushers, about our environmental program and our efforts to reduce our energy and our water and reduce our waste. Hopefully you can go up to one of our ushers and ask them about our environmental program and they can tell you about it. Does that make them a green job? Because for the scale of their responsibilities, they include environmental education. I'd like to argue that eventually it should. If we could all agree on the education platform, I think it could be a green job. So identify opportunities to participate and create them is a big thing. And then engage key stakeholders. So once again, modify these best practices for your stakeholders and engage them. And for you, if you're in that place where you want to be an environmental or sustainability officer and you can't, engage the people in this community, because a lot of us created our own positions or moved from a corporate position to a consultant. So that would be my 3 key things on how to be a sustainability officer.